So I have to start off with an apology that apparently, because I couldn't hear you, you cranked up the gain enough that the recording was hot. So entirely my fault.
Last week?
Yeah.
Okay.
I figured what we probably should have done instead of just going with the gain was probably something like, pulling up a meter or something so that you can make sure it wasn't clipping. But I didn't think to make that recommendation.
I mean, Audio Hijack has a thing. Didn't look like it was clipping.
Yeah, I know. And it didn't sound like it to me over the, FaceTime call, but it sure was hot from the local file.
I left tea in a container that was closed and sealed for too long, and I was cleaning it out tonight, and I cleaned it out all nice and neat, and everything's fine, except for the seals, whatever plastic they're using, whatever soft flexible plastic they're using to seal. There's 3 seals. Whatever they're using, they all smelled like vomit. Like even after like scrubbing them with, Dawn soap detergent and like really getting into them and really trying to clean them, they still smell of vomit. So I'm not using that cup tonight.
I wonder if like soaking them in vinegar or something would take that away after time.
Probably. My next go-to is to run them through the dishwasher.
It's probably the same type of seal. So I picked up a Vitamix blender, I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. Whenever my previous one died. And the way it's put together, there's a silicone seal that the blade assembly has between it and the cup. It sounds like the same kind of thing. I know we have issues with that occasionally. I have not found a good way to keep it nice and clean.
Other than washing it right when it's done. Yeah. See, normally, I don't know. Normally this is, it was a long time that I left it sealed and left it in my car. That's why it stayed sealed for so long. And I was like, it smelled when I opened it. Like there wasn't much liquid left. It was like drops that came out, but it was still just enough to make it nasty, and it smelled bad, and the seals smelled really bad. And I was like, I mean, I hesitated to say silicone because I don't know if it is silicone. But
yeah, and I know typically silicone has some inherent property that keeps it from creating that odor. It's I guess it's antimicrobial, not antibacterial. So maybe it wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know. I might do a little bit of reading on silicone. Probably not. I'm not that vested.
Yeah.
So I know we mentioned talking about critical race theory because we didn't really delve into it last show like we had originally thought. It ended up being more of a general just race conversation.
We got a lot more to talk about.
Yeah. I want to really dive into it, but there are so many smaller subtopics that have also just kind of come out of seemingly nowhere over the past week. So I'm going to change the format of Bytes real quick, and I'm just going to run through a list of things that have just come to my attention in general, some more horrific than others. And then we can see if we want to kind of tackle something around those as an overarching topic, or if we want to still pivot further into critical race theory. Does it sound like a good plan to you?
Yeah.
So the first one is just because at this point there's always new COVID news. Interesting that COVID increases risks of dementia and other cognitive impairments in older survivors, especially those who were had severe infections. I'll include a link to the Ars Technica article on it with the show notes, of course. There was another article, I did not link this one, but it was interesting that the detection of COVID in wastewater, which has been a thing for a bit now, right? The CDC monitors wastewater for the presence of COVID to help try to identify places where infections may be on the rise, even if hospitalizations aren't yet. And that's been alarmingly increasing relatively recently. Piggybacking on that one, Europe has often been a few weeks ahead of the United States with COVID trends, and cases are now rising in Britain, Germany, Italy, and some other parts of Europe. They're currently attributing the main cause to that increase with the more contagious variant of Omicron, variant that has already been seen in the States as well.
Yes.
And I think that pretty much wraps up the COVID headlines that I had. The other things, though, the things that really started me on a trend of trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with this country as a whole anymore, are more isolated at the moment, but have the potential to be far more prevalent. One, apparently a lawmaker in Texas introduced a bill that would seek the death penalty for any woman who received an abortion. It's so mind-numbingly vile that I can't wrap my head around that one. Idaho has now followed the Texas lead, quote-unquote, and created a similar private citizens can sue people for getting an abortion after 6 weeks, which I think just depicts the beginning of a trend in a number of states, especially knowing how horrific many of those state legislatures have been recently. And also in Ohio, the governor signed into law permitless concealed carry of firearms. That one also, I just have no way to wrap my head around. There were more that I didn't note because at this point I kind of figured the list is a bit long. But those are what I have. And at this point, like the just full on attack on life, honestly, especially with regards to the woman's right to choose debate. And in Ohio, like anybody who happens to be cut off by a pissed off guy in a vehicle that has a gun because he can carry it concealed without a permit. And the assault on life, I think, is the piece that really has been bugging me in the wake of what's occurring in the Ukraine and the feeling that I still think we, the collective we, being the democracies of the world, should be doing more. And so that's where my head has been. And that's where I'll pause and open up to any discussion, thoughts, saying yeah, and you have no words for it and moving on, regardless of what we do. I'll at least pause talking for a moment and quit making everything sound so doom and gloom, at least for 5 minutes.
Well, I remember once hearing, if you want the comment, when I was a young adult, I heard this in Sunday school, and it was like, if you want to understand the adult world, follow the money trail. That bit of advice has served me well. I'll iterate on that and say, if this benefits white dudes in any way, shape, or form, especially bad white dudes, they're going to push it. They're going to try to make it happen. If it gives white dudes more power, they're going to try to make that happen.
Yeah, I understand that argument for sure. And I think especially with like the Ohio law, that makes a lot of sense. You have a governor who apparently alienated a large part of his base with COVID restrictions and is now going the extreme opposite side to retain power. That's a fairly easy case to make. But there are much better ways to do it. I don't truly follow the money on the attack on abortions.
Well, you quite obviously can't tell white women to start making more babies. So you outlaw abortions. so that they can't get rid of their babies. Because
I mean, I thought of that angle, but I don't think that that's the angle, because if you pause and think about,
I feel like that's not the most prominent angle.
Right, who generally is going to seek an abortion?
It's usually white women.
Is that actually statistically fact?
I'd have to look, but like my wet finger in the air is it's white women with money.
See,
I've got two kids. I don't want another.
My thought was that it was more the disadvantaged population that didn't have access to adequate resources otherwise. And maybe this is why I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around it, as far as backing up and trying to follow the money, so to speak. Because I was thinking it was more you have disadvantaged populations who can't afford proper medical treatment or care or prophylactics. It took me a moment to think of the word. Or whatever the case may be, preventative measures just aren't available or aren't easily accessible, and abortion seems to be a more humane path out of that trap. And that sounds horrible. And I'm not wanting it to sound that way, but this is where I just honestly have no clue. I know I've been fed a narrative on who generally seeks abortions, and I don't know where I've been fed that narrative from. And that's clouding my thought process significantly.
So some real-time follow-up. It might be considered stale data, but it's the top hit from the Guttmacher Institute from 2014. 60% of abortion patients were in their 20s. The second largest group were in their 30s at 25%, which sort of makes sense because that's the age at which you're most likely to get pregnant. There was no racial or ethnic group that made up the majority of abortion patients, but 39% were white, 28% black, 25% Hispanic, 6% Asian or Pacific Islander, and 3% were of some other race or ethnicity. 59% of abortion patients in 2014 had at least one previous birth. 3/4 of abortion patients were low income. 49% living at less than the federal poverty level, and 26% living at 1 to 199% of the poverty level.
So the narrative about disadvantaged certainly bears some semblance to the data as well.
Yes.
And I wish I could remember where I heard that narrative, because it's been quite some time, and it's why I can't eloquently express it at this point.
There was a big study in the 90s or post, sometime after the 90s, basically after Roe versus Wade, 20 years after Roe versus Wade, there was like a significant decrease in crime, and so which would have occurred in the 90s, and the Stevens that wrote Freakonomics traced it back to the fact that Roe versus Wade was legalized abortion, and so there's this whole wave of kids that weren't born into bad situations, and that was the result. That's why the resulting drop in crime occurred.
That's probably where I'm remembering part of this from.
That's what I'm thinking.
But to going back a step, because I don't want to make it specifically an abortion topic for the show either. The piece that I'm grappling with is how you can have a group of lawmakers tout a unanimous bill to end or to make daylight savings time permanent. I'm not sure if you heard about that. That was passed today through the Senate.
Oh, we're not falling back later this year?
The plan would be to fall back and then go forward one more time, one more cycle, and then that'd be permanent. So 2023.
Okay. What about Arizona?
It still has to go to the House and then be signed. So it may or may not actually make it. But you have a Senate you apparently passed it unanimously, And we've got this kind of actual meaningful bullshit being passed without intervention. And I get that there's a reason we have state governments versus federal government, and a lot of things are set up the way they are for that separation of duties and responsibilities and who can do what. But come on. At some point, you've got to be able to say, you all are conducting nothing short of an attack on women who had a constitutional right, theoretically still have a constitutional right, and it's being just
their rights are being bulldozed. They're being bulldozed.
I was trying to think of what's the term for basically ripping something from the inside out or bottom up.
Eviscerate?
Well, that's what I went with, but that's not quite right, because to eviscerate something is to slice it open in the middle, basically.
I thought that was lacerate.
Maybe. All right. I'll have to. I wasn't planning.
In the military, they have a term for this called FUBAR.
Yes.
We're gonna fuck this up beyond recognition, all recognition.
But in the light of what's that?
I was going to say a quick thing. I I started using that term a lot more because I felt like I was dropping the F-bomb too much at work. That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
All right, continue.
So in the light of all of that, seeing things like journalists who have lost their lives in Ukraine and not getting a mention in any news platform that I've seen anyway, including employees of Fox News who just happen to be Ukrainian employees. Where does all of this coalesce into something that makes sense? Because it's almost like there's a just full-on attack on anyone and anything that isn't, I mean, you could say white male, but that's not quite right. Wealthy white male gets closer to the mark, but it's not even specifically wealth.
It's power. Those that
but
have
power. But power specifically in what form?
Power has multiple forms, and so I think we see this could also segue.
I'm trying to lead us there. Yeah,
critical race theory, but like there's it's getting a bad name and a bad rap because the people that currently have power, whatever that power be, sometimes it is the power of money, the power of wealth, the power of influence, that power, the power holders don't want to relinquish that power, and anything that would equalize them would result in them relinquishing power, and so many of them are fighting to prevent that from happening. So it's not just one underlying motive or arcing, cohesive.
There's not a single reason. Yes,
right. It's those that currently have power, whatever power it is, they want to keep that power.
The reason I pivoted to leading down that line of questioning is because something I found interesting as I was reading about the history of critical race theory was really that every decade has its cycle of picking something and attempting to keep it from being taught because of the same general reason. And that reason is fear that students would be somehow harmed by exposure to some ideas. That's the argument. Yeah. That's the argument. And in all of these different cases, the concern is that exposure to an idea harms someone. I'm going to repeat that because I want you to hear how absurd it sounds when spoken calmly. Exposure to an idea harms someone. An idea can't harm you. Acting on an idea, sure. Actions can harm people. So where's the connection that you're trying to make and failing? And I'm obviously not saying you, John, but you as the collective society of people arguing against something. Where's the connection between exposure to an idea and acting on it? There's not one, other than a person's predisposition to act on something in the first place. And if they have that predisposition, this idea or X idea or Z idea isn't going to change it. Hopefully, exposure to these other ideas can change the course of their initial predisposition, which is the whole point, theoretically, of education. So let's make it a little more specific. Which topic would you like to choose, or which general idea would you like to choose? And we'll craft a real-time specific example and see how this goes. And what I'm thinking of are things that have been met with backlash. So we've mentioned evolution in the past.
I was just going to say the first one that comes to mind is the theory of evolution.
Yeah, Marxism is the first one that comes to mind for me, which is why I've opposed the question. So let's use evolution. If you are exposed to this idea of evolution, the actual proper theory of evolution being that living things, over time, adapt to their environments in ways that change them, right? That's really the theory of evolution in its most basic layman's terms. We see examples of it every day.
Yeah.
If your native location of origin or birth, if you are descended from people who spent their entire time in the Antarctic, your skin color is going to be a lot more pale. If you're descendant from someone who roamed Africa, your skin's going to be a bit darker. That's an adaptation. That in and of itself completely and expressly illustrates the concept of evolution.
I mean, we've watched it a lot the past couple of years with the evolving of variants of SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, that's a very prescient example. I wasn't quite ready to go there, but I was thinking about it. So I wanted to emphasize my previous comment about exposure to this idea of evolution. Where does that harm me or anybody? Where is the connection to action where me learning about a theory of evolution causes me to slash 30,000 people's throats?
It's interesting because the high school textbook, my biology book from high school, was full of like bullshit propaganda, which is probably
we could have a full topic about propaganda in education.
Well, I'll just illustrate this. There was an illustration of in my fundamental Christian-based biology textbook that I used in 10th grade. There was an image of Charles Darwin standing with food in his hands and like a steak or something, and jumping up at him were the bodies of two dogs, like trying to get the steak, and the steak was labeled as the theory of evolution. And on one head of the dog, it was the head of Adolf Hitler, and the other head of the dog was Stalin. And the concept was that the theory of evolution fueled the atrocities of the Nazi Party and the genocide the USSR.
So I haven't seen that. What I was thinking of, I was expecting you to mention the classic example of like a circular diagram that has like bacteria to some single-celled organism to fish to land mammal to human, or like that type of diagram. Obviously, there's some other steps there, but I mean that's a horrifically misleading diagram.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say there's just so much terrible stuff in that textbook. I had to keep it. It's so good. It's so bad. It's so good.
I might have to see it at some point.
I will send you some pictures. I remember being taught. Well, the sun is burning, and we know that the sun is burning out and the fuel is being consumed, and if you were to backward calculate how much fuel has lost, well, not even like, I think they said 500,000 years ago, the sun would have been so hot that it would have not just made life impossible on Earth, it would have burned the Earth. And I remember hearing that in 10th grade and being like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But then I found out that the sun is not a campfire, and that nuclear fission, even though it's burning itself out, it's burning itself at a constant rate right now.
Yeah.
Like that's the stuff I grew up with.
So I do remember something similar to that as well. And I remember there being some argument about trying to extrapolate how much fuel it's burned to figure out how soon it was going to destroy us all by, burning out and then imploding. And none of that is... It is true that eventually the sun will destroy us,
yes,
assuming that we only exist here. But, I mean, honestly, we're on the cusp of... Yes, we're on the cusp of further space travel. Like, I would expect by the time the sun destroys Earth, we will have colonized another planet.
Yeah, if we make it.
Yeah, assuming the Ohio law doesn't take place everywhere and then you have road rage fuckers shooting people.
I was about to ask you what the Ohio law was, and then I put together what you were talking about, the Ohio law, but that you were just mentioning. But then, because my first thought was like the Fermi paradox. I was like, maybe the Ohio law is the beginning of the Great Filter.
Yeah. I can see how you got there. But, now I've lost my train of thought because now I'm just laughing. Oh. So I mentioned that COVID was a great example of the theory of evolution as well, because you brought it up, and it's much easier to grasp when you're talking about something that evolves that quick, right? We've seen it play out. The traditional theory of evolution, if you think about what Darwin proposed, generally took place over multiple generations of whatever living thing he was being observed. So, like for humans, that's a pretty long lifespan.
Yeah, I think he looked at finches.
I think so. And I know birds were a primary subject, but I do think it was finches. We can fact check that if you want. But part of why people like to argue against the theory of evolution is because you don't see it in humans, unless you look at a much grander timeline where you can look at changes over hundreds of years. And we don't grasp that very well. So if you instead look at something such as SARS-CoV-2, that we've seen one iteration and then another and then another and then another, that is again an exemplary example of the theory of evolution. You can describe it as the way a virus works with mutations in general, but the whole premise of the way a virus works is founded on the concept that a virus will evolve to become more effective or more infective and to survive, in the wake of not having readily available hosts.
Its ability to infect and be contagious will increase, and its virulence will decrease. That's what we expect to see. That's the trend we expect to see.
And it's what's played out so far.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. It's like that BA2. You said version. I don't want to say variant or strain or whatever, but I was going to say, is it proving to be less virulent?
Have you seen the articles about the quote unquote stealth variant of Omicron?
No.
Oh, okay.
Is it black and have no right answer?
Well, it was given the moniker BA2, so it could stand for black something too, I guess, if you wanted to. No, I'm going to dispel any rumors. I have no clue where the naming came from. This Omicron variant, this BA2 variant, has been reported in the U.S. as a stealth variant previously. And the reason it was reported as a quote-unquote stealth variant had to do with the way it would show up on COVID tests as Delta, I think, instead of Omicron. But it was actually Omicron, a variant of Omicron falsely identified as Delta or something similar to that effect. There was a version that was still being picked up by testing, but it was misidentified, and so the media, of course, wanted to give it a moniker other than Omicron variant, blah, 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 right? But it has, I've seen news about it for the past couple of months, and it's overall largely following the Omicron pattern of being highly contagious, less severe.
That's what we were expecting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So a little real-time follow-up. It's a subvariant.
Okay. So I'm using the term slightly incorrectly. I apologize.
The original would be called BA1. Like the first Omicron that was talked about, that would be called BA1. This one is BA2. And there was actually a BA3.
Makes sense.
They are subvariants.
I didn't read enough.
Variant.
Yeah, I didn't read enough to catch that. Sorry, I've interrupted twice now. I'll let you finish what you were saying.
Oh no, that was it.
This whole thing. I guess let me back up before I just say this whole thing. Like, what am I talking about? Evolution is what I'm referring to. This whole concept of evolution. You've started to say something twice. What?
Yeah, I do need to interject that the stealth bomber was called the B2 or the B2A. Just want to put that out there.
Hey, that actually makes a lot more sense.
I knew there was a connection in my head from that.
So where I was going, where I was bringing the conversation back to evolution as a whole instead of focusing just on COVID. Where this entire thing bothers me is that evolution is not being presented as an argument against other theories for other aspects of life. You still have the Big Bang Theory, however ridiculous it may end up being, for the creation of life. If you want to argue a religious component about the creation of life, the Big Bang Theory is the one to argue, right? I mean, you have two competing theories on the creation of life. Evolution does not come into play.
So, are we talking about intelligent design as the creation of life?
No.
Okay.
Technically, it would be the theory of creationism, and there's an argument for intelligent design within the theory of creationism.
Okay, so I can go to the creation subshell and say, like, that's not even a theory.
Yes.
Yes. It's a hypothesis.
We reference it as a theory out of acquiescence to it being a counter argument to the theory of the Big Bang Theory.
Like it's a counter argument to an existing theory, and it's not a theory. It's a hypothesis.
Correct. In science.
Well, I guess Big Bang is also a hypothesis.
Correct. In scientific terms, neither are truly a theory.
Okay, just want to make sure we, because that's where, like, people are like, I remember somebody saying to me recently, because I said something about the, SARS-CoV-2 evolving, and they were just, triggered by that, I guess, because they're like, it's only a theory. I'm like, yeah, gravity too. That's only a theory.
So I do love the semantic argument to an extent, because remember that we have the scientific use case of the word theory, and we have the philosophical use case of the word theory, and we have the general populace use of the word theory.
They're all one and the same.
They're all different.
I know.
Same word, different definitions.
It's just how people understand the word theory. It's all the same word. They just understand it differently.
And your theory of theoryism?
Well,
sounded better before I said it, I'm sure. But
no, I just didn't know where to go with this. That didn't sound like I would sound like a complete asshole.
But I mean, it's one of those things where, depending on your academic background, you might toss the word theory out a bit more than someone else. And if you have limited academic background, everything's a theory. I think that's a simple way to describe it. Because if you, by trade, by education and trade, are in the scientific community, it's unlikely you're going to refer to a lot of things as theories that other people would accept as theories. Seems like a bit of a tangent now that I think about it.
I don't.
All right. So we'll table the arguments on theory for a bit.
Yeah, I was mostly just trying to, make it funny.
Where this leads to critical race theory, because we still are 40 minutes into another show and still haven't gotten
theory.
And not to be confused with cathode ray tubes if you see it abbreviated somewhere.
I don't think a lot of people are confusing that. I think just nerds of a certain age.
Yeah, probably more boomers than just. Yeah. Anyway.
No, I don't think boomers were techie enough. I mean, some of them are, but I think the general population of boomers weren't techie enough to see CRT as cathode ray tube. I don't know though.
I was trying to deflect from Gen X because we're the ones. I mean, we
I know.
Wholeheartedly would be the ones who see CRT and think cathode ray tube.
I know. I was trying not to go there as well, so
that's all right. I'll bring it in. But critical race theory. Would you, before we even say anything else, just to kind of set the level of where it falls on the theory spectrum, would you liken it to something like the theory of evolution, or would you liken it to something like the Big Bang Theory? Where would it fall on the scale of scientific theory, just as a outside observation?
So I think theory is the right term because of its academic nature, but I don't feel like it is comparable to scientific theory because you're not going to apply the scientific method to it because it has to do with social constructs. And these social constructs, I mean, I think there's a lot of you can gather what might be the equivalent of hard data that you would get in basic health sciences, but I think it differs in the way that it is. Even though a few minutes ago I was just making a joke about how it's just one word and people just don't know how to use it right or whatever, which was it's being pedantic, or not pedantic, but pejorative, I guess. Anyway, I think it's comparable to the evolution if I had to choose, because it is something that's observable and repeatable, perhaps. So
I'm going to confess to something.
I don't know.
I trapped you a little bit in that question. The social sciences in general, the scientific method is absolutely harped on and attempted to follow to the best of the ability of those involved.
I was going there.
The problem is that it's not ethical to perform experiments on people for hopefully obvious reasons.
There's certain things where we look at the data that's out there through observation, not necessarily experimentation.
Right. And
this falls under that.
And that's historically been where the problem with social scientific inquiry being able to reproduce repeatable results consistently and not have some other variable be a possible outlier or skewer of data as opposed to traditional physical sciences. That's always been the divide. And when you think about a scientific theory in the physical sciences, critical race theory would fit the general definition in the social sciences because there are certain things you cannot exercise control over. You have to rely on multiple different measurements from different perspectives and observing actions and results and being non-invasive. However you want to phrase it, there are just a lot of things you can't control for. And you have to attempt to weed those out with other studies and try to correlate the data. And it's very much imperfect. There's no excuse to be made otherwise. But all of those caveats aside, critical race theory I would put completely on par with any other scientific theory put forward by any physical science.
I agree with that.
I think the primary thing or the primary reason it sees opposition has nothing to do with what it is and everything to do with branding.
Yeah, I mean, how many people that oppose it actually know what it is?
I would love to find one person, just one.
Yeah.
And actually get them to explain why they are opposed to it. And it's
hard to explain why you're opposed to something when you don't know what it is.
Yeah. And
I mean, Fox News tells me it's bad, so yeah.
Well, it's the same thing that find me one person who is opposed to socialistic ideals who understands what they are. You can be opposed to communism. That's fine. There are plenty of reasons you can be opposed to communism. Communism is not the only form of a socialistic idealized society.
Well, how many people think that socialism is on a continuum between capitalism and communism? I feel like I feel like too many people.
I feel like the majority of Americans hear socialism and immediately equate it to be synonymous with communism. I think that you have a number of political science and sociology majors who understand the difference. Psychology doesn't really delve into that much, but those students are generally also exposed to a lot of the same ideas as your poli-sci and sociology folks. So maybe a subset of psychology students. I kind of grapple to stretch with any other subset within the realm of academia that would be exposed to the differences.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that just to say that even with that subset of Americans who would rightfully understand that socialism exists in many forms on across that scale,
they just don't know it.
Economics majors, I would expect economists to also understand, because you can have a social a generally socialistic society and a free market economy. And the only way you could understand that would be to be exposed to it. And if your whole focus is the study of economies, I would hope you're exposed to it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was like, you can have a free market economy with progressively socialist. What's the word?
A progressively socialist society. Yes. So,
and it's like so many people that like, no, it's capitalism. They have a hard on for capitalism. Like, how much capital do you have?
Do you really know what capitalism is?
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you have communism is bad. And I was like, so what's so bad about the workers owning the means of production? It's like, you throw these words around and don't actually know what you're throwing around. It's heavy words lightly thrown.
On paper, communism is the perfect form of government.
Right.
The only reason it falters is because
it has people.
Theorizing it on paper doesn't take into account that it eventually resides in the culmination of power by a select few.
Right.
Because you have a select few responsible for distribution of goods. And when you have a select few in charge of anything, you fuck up.
They're susceptible to corruption.
It's not even susceptible to corruption. It's the fact that it breeds corruption.
Fair. So this is an interesting thing that I thought about. We're going to talk about capitalism a little bit. And that is that if you are a wage employee and you're a capitalist, the only thing that you have control over is how fast you work. So capitalism tells me that to make more, to be a good capitalist, the less work I do and the time frame that I have to do work, I'm getting paid more for. That's the only thing that you can control, like as a wage worker, is the amount of time it takes you to accomplish a task. And if you take a lot longer to accomplish a task, you're making more money for that per task. I find that interesting.
Well, it goes back to the question of how many people actually understand what capitalism is.
Right.
Most Americans are certainly in favor of a free market economy. I think that's pretty clear.
Oh, they confuse capitalism and the free market economy. That's the thing.
Yes.
That's what they're confusing.
Yes. Why?
It's the same reason. It's the same reason that people don't want to teach critical race theory. It's all marketing. We're going to market capitalism as good and communism is bad. And socialism is bad, really. That's what they're marketing here. And that critical race theory is bad. Oh, why are we marketing it that way? And well, because I have power and I don't want to let go of the power. And if we start teaching these ideas, then I might have to give a woman more power. I might have to give a black man more power. No.
Let me rephrase that for you slightly, because I think you hit it perfectly, but I might have to give a woman more money. I might have to give a black person more money.
Yeah.
I might have to actually pay that Hispanic for doing a job. Fair wage. Living wage. We hear these terms just tossed around as though they mean something different. At the end of the day, the concern is attempting to not pay any worker their worth.
And we're even talking about $20. Previous generations fucked up the economy so much that we're not even gonna make as much money as they did. We don't have those advantages that they had. And then they're doubling down and fighting against paying a woman an equal salary.
And just to clarify, when you talk about $20, what you're referencing is that a single income family 50 years ago, could afford a house and a car, a couple of kids.
Yeah, I'm referring to the fact that wages and inflation matched each other. Like as inflation increased, wages increased. And then it split in the 1980s, early 80s. It split and inflation kept split away and kept going higher, and wages did not. Like our generation doesn't have the same buying power as the beginning of the Gen X and the boomers.
Right. And I knew what you meant, but I wanted to make sure it was explained for the sake of the recording.
Our audience.
Yeah.
Our beloved audience. I know folks out there that are listening, so.
There have to be. There are too many downloads of the episodes for people to not be listening.
I only download it once.
I think technically I count as 2 downloads. That might be something I investigate at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But over the past week, there was like 50-something downloads. So there is an audience of some sort.
Sweet.
Whether they're actively listening is a whole different story. But somehow there's a cumulative number of downloads. And so, like, feedback, come on. How many times do we have to ask before somebody at least sends a message?
We'll find somebody. It'll happen.
One day. Without that digression, the one other kind of point that I wanted to, or not even point, the one other statement that I really wanted to bring in, because it's more dear to me than like the theory of evolution. Exposure to Marxism is hugely important, especially for political science majors. And yet Marxism was yet another theory or teaching that has been long lobbied against because it's falsely equivocated to communism. And all of these things, the common bond that they share is that people in power don't want other people critically thinking about the current situation. Doesn't matter whether they believe the current situation is better or these other ideals are better. It's that these things being brought into the curriculum allow for a person to take a moment and say, I never thought about that. Let me think about the state of affairs today, where I am, and whether it makes sense to maybe steal a thought here, or, yeah, no, that is absolutely horrifically backward. There's no reason I would want to go that route, and that explains why I have my feelings this other direction. The underlying problem is that overall, society tries to keep people from critically thinking about a situation. If you don't actually analyze a situation and come to a conclusion, it's a lot easier to accept the rhetoric that you hear day in and day out.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.